Hello again to my American Embassy friends here in Tunisia. I'm back with another quarantine cooking video for you. This time around I thought that I would show you how to cook a whole fish. A lot of times in America you can buy fish that's already been cleaned and filleted and ready for you to just bring home and cook in your oven or in a saute pan. But here I have rarely found fillets, and so you usually have to buy the whole thing. So I'm going to show you what to look for when purchasing a whole fish, how to clean it out. That can be probably the most intimidating part if you have never cleaned a fish before. It can be a little icky, but once you get past that, it's actually very easy. To go along with our whole fish, I'm also going to show you how to make a really quick little fruit salsa to serve on top of it. This will be using some of the vegetables that we got in our Embassy veggie pickup this week, and the melon that was included in that as well. I think it's a small cantaloupe, but they may have another name for it here. They look like this when you cut them open. Before we get started on that, I'm going to show you how to make one of my favorite cocktails, a whiskey sour. I think a whiskey sour goes particularly well with seafood because it's lemony and bright. Think about all the lemon that you might squeeze over a piece of fish after you've eaten it, and so this is sort of an accompaniment to that. I also find them to be very refreshing, and so sitting out, in your backyard or on your patio on a hot day, having just cooked this whole fish, having this really refreshing, fruit salsa on it, and then your whiskey sour to go along. So we're going to do that first, and then we'll get into the fish. Okay, so I'm gonna make two whiskey sours here with this recipe. One for myself and one for Liz. You can make a double for yourself here, or just have the recipe and make one at a time. So you need very few ingredients to make a whiskey sour. So I have 2 egg whites here, so you just separate the yolks out. I save my yolks for use in a carbonara or a custard, and just dump those right in there. If you don't have a cocktail shaker, you can use a mason jar or one of those protein powder shaker bottles that works just as well. There are all sorts of things that you can use. You don't need a fancy cocktail shaker set to make this. So I have 2 egg whites in here. I'm gonna put 1.5 ounces of lemon juice. I have a little jigger, that's what these are called, that measures my ounces out for me here. I put in 2 sugar cubes, 1 per person. If I'm making it for myself, I'll use less sugar, but Liz prefers a sweeter drink, so I'll use 2 of them. That's about, you could use maybe 3/4 of an ounce of simple syrup if you're using simple syrup instead of sugar. And then I do 4.5 ounces of your whiskey or bourbon of choice into the shaker. It's about 1.5 shots, 1.25 shots per person there. And then I'm going to pour all this into the larger side. And then I'm just going to give it a little bit of a dry shake. So no ice or anything else, just to start to get the egg whites frothing. So nothing fancy about my shaker style here. Once you've done that, I usually add 3 ice cubes. You can add more or less. Ice cubes serve as an agitator for the egg whites, so you get that nice foam, and they start to dilute your beverage a little bit to make it possibly more palatable if a straight shot of whiskey or bourbon is not your jam. Once all the ice is in the shaker, we're just going to close it back up nice and tight, or screw the lid on your mason jar or on your protein shaker, whatever it is, and then you're going to shake it. Your hands, if you're using a metal or glass container, should start to get cold, but around 30 seconds. Okay, so now that we have shaken that for 30 seconds, maybe a little bit more than 30 seconds, just to get that foam going, we're going to take the lid off. And what I like to do is to settle the bubbles, so I'll give it a little swirl. If you've ever been a barista, then you maybe did this when you made lattes. You swirled it to sort of smooth out the milk to get that nice foam. We're just going to do the same thing here. Give it a little swirl, give it a tap or two. So once you're all shaken up and swirled, you're going to take a strainer. If you don't have a strainer like this, you can pour through maybe a mesh strainer or even a colander if you want to get really creative with it. It's quarantine, you have to work with what you have. And then and I like to pour between 2 glasses when I'm doing 2 drinks, just to make sure that one doesn't end up super foamy, and the other one has all of the actual drink in it. So you can see we're nice and divided here between the 2 glasses. If you want, sometimes I will take off my strainer and scoop out a little of the residual foam if I just feel like I haven't really gotten it out. So there you are, cheers. Something to sip on while you're cooking, and something to make to go with a meal, or both. I will say, if you're not a fan of whiskey, you can very easily substitute in any alcohol that you'd like. You do need to keep the lemon juice in there because that is what cooks the egg whites. It's what helps make the foam nice and luscious as it is. But you could certainly add in additional things, and I do sometimes. Sometimes instead of using sugar, I'll use maple syrup. Give yourself a little maple whiskey sour there. Add in some cherry juice, or whatever juice you like. So use some orange juice in there. Just play around and find out what works for you. So as you're sipping, we're just going to go ahead and get into making the fish. So ingredients that you're going to need for this dish are a whole fish. If you're buying it here in Tunis, I recommend either a dorade or a lou. That's going to be about 1.5 pounds to 2 pounds of fish. In the States, you can get bronzino. They probably have a few more options that you're more familiar with. So just buy your favorite white, firm flesh fish for this recipe. About a cup of rice flour, a tablespoon of chili powder of your choice. You can use paprika. I'm using an ancho chili powder here today. It's a little bit smokier, but still not spicy. If you want to spice it up, you can add in some heat that way. I'm going to add some heat into the salsa instead for myself. And about a teaspoon of salt. For the salsa, we're going to be using about half of a small cantaloupe. If you don't have cantaloupe, you can use another fruit of your choice. Pineapple would be very good in this. You could use peaches or nectarines, anything that's in season that you like, that will add some sweetness to the dish. In addition to that, we're going to have about 8 to 10 mint leaves, about a 1/4 cup to a 1/2 cup of chopped cucumber, and then about a 1/4 cup of sliced red onions. Okay, so let's get started. Okay, so I've already cut some of these ingredients off camera that I figured you guys could work out for yourself. So about a cup of the cantaloupe, a 1/4 cup to a 1/2 cup of cucumber, some salt, a little bit of pepper, and some red pepper flakes right here in this bowl. I will also have this recipe available on my blog, written in a link so you guys can check it out. But I wanted to show you a trick for cutting onions that might make your life a little bit easier. So if you take your onion and cut it in half, and then cut sort of along the lines of the striations on the outside of the onion, just like this. When you cut into the onion, you're going to end up with really nicely diced onion pieces. It's a little kitchen trick for you there. I know that sometimes cutting onion can be a laborious process. So there you go. Next, we're going to move on to cutting the mint. This, you just sort of want to get it as fine as you can. So I like to bunch it up into one stack, run my knife through it one way, and then sort of run it through again. There is no real trick here to that speed. It's just practice and getting comfortable. And if you, having a knife that's a little bit rounded for me is helpful, and a knife that fits your hand well. So you know, I have smaller hands, so I like to use slightly smaller chef knives. But if you ground the tip with the heel of your non-dominant hand, and then run your dominant hand up and down, you're going to be able to get those small minces and that finer cut. So we're going to add those leaves in. Right there. So I've already added salt and pepper to this. This is definitely to your taste on seasoning. A little bit of red pepper flake, not too spicy. If you have some pickier eaters in your house. And then a very small little drizzle of olive oil. And then we're just gonna mix all that up. This is really great on its own as a salsa, especially if you use pineapple with it. And I think it's better once it's been sitting for an hour or so. It lets it sort of marinate and all the flavors meld together. Now we're going to move on to cleaning and cooking the fish. Okay, so here is our fish. This is called a dorade here. I believe it's part of the sea bream family. You can get them here in Tunis. They're pretty popular in France. You know, we're on the Mediterranean here, and so also popular in other Mediterranean cities. When you're buying a fish, there are a few things you want to look for. So first of all, a fish market should never smell fishy. It should smell like the ocean. You know, if fish smell fishy, it's because they've been sitting there for too long. They should be on ice as well. That is actually one of the biggest things for me here, is that not all vendors keep their fish on ice, and so I strongly prefer to buy from vendors who keep their fish on ice. The grocery stores here actually have really great and very, very fresh selections. My second biggest tell is the eyes. I'm not sure if this translates to video or not, but this little buddy right here has very clear eyes, which means he's pretty fresh. Once they start to get cloudy, that means the fish is aging and getting old. You can also tell how fresh a fish is by if the guts are still in it. So this fish still has its guts intact. I did buy it yesterday. I wouldn't recommend going more than a day without gutting a fish because the guts start to get weird once they've been sitting for too long. And then once you've gutted it, I would cook it again within a day. I usually try to buy fish the day I'm going to make it. Easy process. So you're going to need a few tools to do this. One will be a dull butter knife for scaling the fish. You're going to need a sharp knife. You can use a serrated knife or just a sharp utility knife. I do like the serrated knives, and that's just because I worked for a chef who used these pretty exclusively in their kitchen. A small spoon so that you can get some help in scooping out the guts, and then just a pair of kitchen shears to help us with shears. Okay, so first things first, we're going to scale the fish. So I do this in a bag because otherwise it can be extremely messy and get scales all over your kitchen. So you're just going to take your knife and run it along the opposite grain of the scales, and they'll just start to pop off. And if you keep it covered, so you're not even going to be able to really see me doing this, but you can see on the knife that the scales are coming off here. And you just run it all along the fish, on the tail, up to the head, down near the belly, keeping it in the bag so the mess stays mostly contained. Sorry about all the wrestling. Okay, and then once you've done that, you're going to flip it over, do the other side. So I just like to cut off all of the fins. And what I do with this, so I have a little trash bowl here, and the fish, when you buy them, usually come in a bag. So I just toss my scraps into the bag. We're going to use the same bag to help us contain the mess while we're scaling the fish. So I cut off all the side fins, this top dorsal fin, and you really want to be careful here on the top dorsal fin. These spines are pretty pokey, and if you've ever poked yourself while peeling shrimp or eating crabs, you know that seafood pokes are not fun and can kind of give you a nasty infection. So just be careful there. Check. Now we're gonna flip him over there. Cut off that front fin. Again, bottom fin here. Okay, so there we go. So we've removed most of the fins. So I'm gonna flip this over, and I hope you can see here, you're gonna cut the fish open from the little hole on the bottom, which is actually the anus, and you're gonna cut all the way up through the top, just under the mouth. There is a little bone here, so you're gonna have to give a little bit of a push, but it's a pretty tiny bone, and so as long as your knife is sharp, you should be able to get through it. So I am right-handed, and so I just find it easier to work from right to left. You want to make sure when you're cutting into the fish that you're not stabbing in there. You really just want to get in maybe 1/4 of an inch and pull, because you don't want to cut into any of the intestines or the organs or anything like that. So I'm just going to insert like that, and then cut up. Do be careful here, because obviously the fish is slippery. So just make sure that your fingers aren't in the way while you're doing this. Okay, so this is the part that may be a little gross, but I promise it's quick, it's relatively painless. I do run my knife kind of up along the top and just along the bottom to help disconnect any tissues that have stuck. Okay, so you can use your hands, just reach right in. You can see there's all sort of in a sack here, or if you are more comfortable using a spoon, you don't want to use something sharp, because you don't want to cut into the walls of the fish here. You're just trying to kind of scrape these out. They are attached, obviously, because they're organs, so you do kind of want to give some pressure there, and I find that can be more easily done with your fingers. So we're just going to throw all that into that little trash bag there. So once you've removed most of the guts, there is sort of a little air pocket here on the inside. You can see it's kind of like a silver skin, and I just like to sort of poke through that. You're not really cutting, you're just going to poke through that that membrane, just to make sure you've gotten everything out. You want to be able to touch the bottom of the spine of the fish. So you can see that we still have a little bit of residue and everything in here. So what we're next going to do is just take this to the sink and give it a rinse under really cold water, and then we will move on to the actual preparation. So as you may be able to tell, I filmed the cleaning of the fish before I filmed the actual cooking of the fish. And that was because I bought 2 different fish and cooked one night and for just Liz and I, and one the other night for this video. But one thing I did want to mention that I forgot to do in that video was to take the gills out. And that's another pretty easy step. You just want to open up kind of this flap next to the mouth, run your knife underneath and along the sides, and just pull that gill right out, just like that. And so I'm just going to rinse this fish off again really quickly, and then we're going to get into the cooking. So we're actually going to be whole frying the fish today. I had some requests for a recipe that didn't involve an oven, because I think some people have been having oven issues out here. So this is going to be actually a very quick way to do this fish. So it's important that you have all of your ingredients ready. You're going to want a wide-bottomed, deep pan, something that you can comfortably fit your fish in. If your pans are too small, you could always cut the head off of your fish. I like to leave my head on for presentation, but if you are limited in your pan size, that is an option. But that means it's important to have everything ready to go. So I have dumped my rice flour, my ancho chili powder, and my salt all onto this plate and mixed it together. If you do not have rice flour, it is very easy to make. You just take a bag of whatever rice you have, put it in your coffee grinder, in your blender, in your food processor, and pulverize it until you have a nice fine powder like that. It works very well. It's very easy to do. And then you want a pan ready with paper towel on it to help after we have fried it. In your pot, you're going to put maybe an inch to an inch and a half of oil. I don't think you need to be able to fully submerge the fish because we're going to flip it over about halfway through our cooking time today. So I already have my pot on the stove with the oil in it heating up because, as I said, this is just going to be really, really fast. So we take the whole fish and we're just going to make 3 slits on each side. And you want those to be kind of deep. Like if you can see, I can stick my finger in sort of the first knuckle there. Like that. And then I flip it over. Same on the other side. Just like that. Now we're going to dredge our little fish friend in our flour mixture here. And you just want to make sure that you get it in all of sort of the open surfaces. So I'm going to put it on the plate. And on this side, I'm going to pick it up to kind of open those cuts that I made and just pat the mixture in there, as well as kind of tossing some into the open cavity there. I'm just going to pat it into the powder. The fish is a little slippery, and so it kind of acts as its own natural binder on the body of the fish. And we're not looking to have a coating like you would on fried chicken or anything like that. Just something that's going to give a little bit of crispiness to the outside. So we're going to do the same thing to the other side. Just pick it up, kind of encourage the rice flour to go in there, and then just pat it anywhere that hasn't easily been covered by tapping it on the plate. Make sure it's nice and covered there. Okay, and then we're just going to shake off that excess. Okay, now I'm going to bring this guy over to my pan and we're gonna fry him up. Okay, so here you can see I have my pot set up on my stovetop. I just am using my nice big Dutch oven. I've only got about an inch of oil in here. Like I said, I really don't think that we need to fully submerge the fish in order to get what we're looking for. And there are ripples on top of the oil, which means it's hot enough. You're using a thermometer to check your temperature. It'd be about 300 degrees. And here we go. So I'm just going to pick the fish up by the tail and very carefully pop them in. So I'm sure you can hear that bubbling away in the background. So I'm going to let that fry for about 4.5 minutes on one side, and then we'll go ahead and flip it over. Okay, so it's been about 4.5 minutes here. I do usually put my hood on while I'm doing this, just to help with any smoke or smell that comes out of it. Now we're going to use some tongs here, and very carefully, we're going to pick him up by his tail and flip him on over. So after we flip the fish over, you still want to make sure that the oil is maintaining that 300 degree, between 300 and 350 degree temperature, and we're going to go for about another 4 minutes on the other side. You can hear as I turn it over that it gets a little bit louder. Your oil is nice and hot, you've got some liquid seeping out of the fish into the oil, and that's going to make a little bit more spatter, so just be very careful as you're working with this hot oil. Okay, so it's been about 4 minutes on the other side here, and I'm just turning the heat off. You're still going to get a little bit of residual bubbling here, and again, very carefully with your tongs, you're going to lift it up by the tail, so we got some nice browning there, and lay it onto our prepared sheet pan. And now we're going to be ready to eat. Okay, so now we're ready to eat our beautiful fried fish. Taking it off the bone can take a little bit of practice, but don't worry about that. It'll get prettier over time and it'll taste delicious. So there won't really be any complaints. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to me. I'm happy to help answer or troubleshoot any problems we're having. And if there are any recipes that you'd like to see, I would be happy for the suggestions. Thanks again, and I'll see you soon. Backyard, eating a whole fish, covered in this drink. This knife is not sharp enough.